This is the battery replacement. Every time I do something on this car, I just film it and throw it up on YouTube. But first you have to take the wheel off. And obviously the wheel is off. Okay. There's some wrenches on top of the wheel. And then you take off this plastic, which is this. Okay. This actually sits up in the wheel well, and it's bolted on in 7 places, or screwed on. You got 1, 2, 3 screws here, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 screws here. Then the plastic comes out, and it's simple, but sometimes people, I don't know, they get scared of doing things. And then you have the 2 cables here, positive and negative, and they're 8mm bolts. And then you have this bracket, and this will sit over the battery like this. Okay, and those are 13mm bolts, and the battery just slides out, and it's a Group 75S. This is a Walmart battery. Last time it broke was on New Year's Day, so now this one breaks on Christmas Eve, 3 years later. But anyway, just made the warranty by a week, so that was cool. I'm going to go over something here real quickly with these ball joints, and I didn't plan on doing this because it was just unexpected. But I know a lot of people are very scared of replacing the lower ball joint on a 96 and 2000 Sebring, and it's the same thing I think for the 2001 to 2007, because it's the same part number. Now you have to change this entire A-frame here, right? Now I've already done this job, but I'm just going to explain it. There's a couple tricks to it. Well, first, I take off the caliper. They're 2 10mm bolts, and you spread out the brakes so it slides off, and then you wire it up over here, or you can use some strings or wire or whatever, coat hanger, hang it on this A-frame. You leave it up out to the side, and you also have to take out this bolt here. I think this is probably a 10mm. Yeah, that's a 10. That's a 10mm, okay? And you be careful these bolts, because sometimes when you're in a car they get rusty, so just take your time. But you know, that might get in the way when you're pulling this caliper out of the way. Now this on the side here, you got, I don't even know what you call this part. It looks like a horseshoe shaped part coming off of the strut, right? Off the strut itself. You would that's an 18mm bolt. You take that off, right? Now you also have to take off on this side. It's kind of a pain because you got the bolts underneath here. I don't know if you can even see these things, or if this is going to probably be a crappy video, but I'm going to explain a couple tricks. It's not so big deal taking out the bolts, but you might have a little problem getting out the bolt from on this side, on the driver's side, because the transmission mount is kind of where the transmission gets in the way. You might have to loosen the transmission mount. I don't think you have to, but there's just enough clearance to get the bolt out of this side. And then over here, there's a bolt that goes straight up here, and there's a nut on the top. Okay, I think that's 18mm on the top on the nut. Okay, you take that out, and also you have to drop the stabilizer arm, and there's some bolts here to drop off the stabilizer arm. It's not a big deal. Then there's one here. There's an Allen wrench that goes inside this one, because there's like a rubber bushing. You put an Allen wrench inside of here, and you loosen this one. I think, I don't know what size this is. That's also an 18mm. Now 18mm is not usually in a lot of metric sets that you get for 3/8 drive. I think they go up to 17mm on the 3/8 drive sets. A lot of times some of the sockets don't have these, but that's what a lot of the bolts are for this. It's 18mm, and this big castle nut for the ball joint that you have to separate with a pickle arm. I think it's like a fork. It's like a fork thing you put in here and you hammer it. That's a 22mm or 13/16. Now if you don't have, I'm just explaining this real quick because I didn't decide not to do this, but figure while I'm here. If you don't have a pickle arm, a lot of times you can hammer this side right here. Let's see if I get this correctly. The side right here of the ball joint, not on top of it, on the side of it, and a lot of times that will cause it to pop out without even using the pickle fork. And if I have to replace some parts and I don't want to, if I had to take out the ball joint, didn't want to damage the rubber seal, that's how I would do it. Now the trick to getting these out, a lot of times I use a crowbar, and I also lift this up high. Use a crowbar to pull them out. Now when you're putting it back in, you might want to use some grease or some lubricant, because it's like a tight fit. There's like a bushing that sits inside there like this, and there's a steel sleeve that goes through it. And if that goes crooked or cockeyed, you might want to look in there with a light and use a screwdriver with a hammer to tap it straight again, and just keep hammering everything in straight. The way the bolts will line up in the back here, one trick I had to learn was that to line up the bolt in the back, you had to lift this ball joint way up to the extent of its travel. Then it lined up fine, very easily. Otherwise, you have a lot of trouble trying to line up the bolt in the back. But basically, that's it in a nutshell. Those two tricks about lining up the bolt in the back here, and also when you're hammering this in, use some grease or oil or lubricant so that the bushing goes straight back in here, because it's a tight fit. And if that sleeve turns a little bit, it gets crooked. I've noticed that happen when I was installing it. You might have to go in there with a screwdriver and tap the just the edge of the metal sleeve that's in the rubber bushing, so it gets straight again, then it'll go in. But it's not a difficult job, actually, to tell you the truth. It's just that there's a couple little tricks that can run you into some problems. I use the ball joints that have they have grease fittings on them, the replacements. Now I got them from Moog, but M-O-O-G. I know this is supposedly expensive, but I paid under $100 each side for the price I got on them, so they were actually a good deal. But I just figured I'd go over this real quick, how this is done. It's not that difficult, but the two tricks to remember is when you're installing this and you're trying to line up those bolts in the back, lift this ball joint way up, and there are some, most of the bolts are 18 millimeter, and also when you're dropping this control arm here, this bushing will turn inside here if you don't use the Allen wrench on it, And there's also a second bolt on the bottom that has the same similar setup that's coming out this side that you use the Allen wrench on. That's it. So that's not that extremely difficult to actually do the lower ball joints either on this car. But sometimes people struggle for a lot of time because they can't get this arm back in. And I said a lot of times that's because they're not using lubricant, and also because that sleeve might be going crooked, or they can't line the bolts up that easy. And it is difficult to take them out, but I found it just using a hammer, large hammer, and a crowbar, it comes out. It's not that difficult at all.